But my favorite moment in this parade of narcissism comes from Princeton. In 2015, Princeton's black students chanted, "We're sick and tired of being sick and tired." Now, this was a phrase first used by Fannie Lou Hamer, a civil rights activist who was beaten in the 1950s for trying to vote. Fannie Lou Hamer had grounds aplenty for being sick and tired of being sick and tired. But any Princeton student, I don't care if he's purple, orange, or blue, who thinks of himself as oppressed is in the grip of a terrible delusion that will encumber him for the rest of his life. Well, perhaps you're thinking, at least the adults on campus are trying to give these students a firmer grip of reality. To the contrary, the adults actively encourage this hysteria. A massive diversity bureaucracy is devoted to cultivating in students ever more arcane species of self-involvement and ever more preposterous forms of self-pity. You want to know the reason for astronomical tuition? Look no further than this bureaucratic bloat. Students regularly act out little psychodramas of oppression before an appreciative audience of diversity deanlets and vice provosts of equity and inclusion who use the occasion to expand their dominion. Many campuses have created bias response teams, modeled presumably on active shooter response teams, on the assumption that discrimination is so rampant and lethal on campus that a rapid defense force is needed. Freshman orientations and dorm sessions invariably feature seminars on toxic masculinity and white privilege. Students are taught that they are either the oppressed or the oppressors. If you are not female, black, Hispanic, gay, or any one of the 116 and still metastasizing categories of gender, the only way that you can escape being an oppressor is by becoming a, quote, ally. Allies are something usually associated with war. And indeed, the reigning thinking is that female students and students of color are literally in a war zone on college campuses and need allies from the opposing side to survive. Am I exaggerating? I am not. UC Berkeley's Division of Equity and Inclusion hung banners throughout campus reminding students of the University of California's paramount mission, assigning guilt and innocence in the ruthlessly competitive totem pole of victimhood. One banner featured a female black student and a male Hispanic student allegedly pleading, "Allow people other than yourself to exist," a message directed to Berkeley's white students and faculty. This is not hyperbole. They meant it literally. College presidents are the worst offenders in encouraging this delusional victimology. After the 3-hour expletive-filled tirade against the Yale sociologist, Yale's president, Peter Salovey, actually thanked the boorish thugs for making him proud of his student body. Yale subsequently conferred a racial justice prize on 2 of the most aggressive participants. The dean of the Harvard Medical School recently removed the portraits of its greatest physician scientists from the entrance hall to the school. You can guess the reason. They were all male, and thus looking on them would make Harvard's wilting medical students feel uncomfortable and unsafe. We can only wish these budding doctors luck in the operating room. Narcissistic identity politics has destroyed the serious pursuit of knowledge throughout the humanities and most of the social sciences. Students are being given a license for ignorance. All they need be told about a book is the melanin content and gonads of its author to know whether they can dismiss its contents as thoroughly repugnant and not worth reading. Shakespeare, Milton, Plato, Kant, and Locke have been variously defenestrated by students who have not the slightest clue about Periclean Athens, the Renaissance, or the Enlightenment. A Columbia undergraduate groused about Columbia's beleaguered core curriculum, quote, "Who is this Mozart, this Haydn, these superior white men?" The core, she said, upholds the premises of white supremacy and racism. No professor has ever defended our intellectual patrimony against such shameful outbreaks of ecstatic know-nothingism without appending some puling qualification about respect for diversity. Academic identity politics are now rapidly spreading throughout the culture at large. Every non-academic institution, no matter how previously meritocratic, is now vulnerable, and that means above all the STEM fields. Exhibit A into our culture's descent into identity-driven mediocrity and thought control is the firing of computer engineer James Damore from Google in August 2017. Damore had written a carefully reasoned, fact-based memo suggesting that the average career preferences of males and females may explain why there's not 50-50 gender parity at Google and other tech firms. The language that Google's CEO used in firing Mr. Damore was a direct import from academic victimology. Google's employees were, quote, hurting, he said, because Damore had dared to challenge the reigning feminist orthodoxy. What followed Mr. Damore's firing was even scarier. A regional branch of the National Labor Relations Board upheld Google's actions on the same bathos-drenched victim grounds. Mr. Damore's memo had made Google's employees feel, quote, unsafe at work, according to the NLRB Associate General Counsel. The memo thus constituted, quote, discrimination and sexual harassment. Consider for a moment what this NLRB ruling means for science. Any evolutionary biologist, psychologist, or economist who studies the different risk preferences and appetite for competition among males and females is now at risk of his job. These branches of science could shut down completely, no matter that their findings are true. The thinking that got Mr. Damore fired is now the dominant characteristic of our time. It holds that the absence of exact proportional representation of various racial, ethnic, and sexual groups in any institution is by definition a result of discrimination. To suggest that different groups have different capacities, cultures, skills, and behaviors that explain the lack of proportional representation is not just taboo, it can get you fired. And so the mad rage for race and gender proportionality in the workplace is accelerating, especially in the Me Too moment. From here on out, everything you read, everything you watch in the mainstream media will have been calculated in conformity with the demands of diversity. If you are a white male, no matter how talented, you're going to have to meet a higher standard to get hired or promoted. This summer, California Polytechnic University proudly announced that its crusade to lower the number of whites on campus was succeeding. Every college is in essence doing the same thing, if not as publicly. Newsrooms are under enormous pressure to find reporters, select sources, and originate stories that improve their diversity profile. Book publishers are obsessively engineering their lists to prioritize, quote, diverse authors and themes. Thanks to media pressure and their own human resources departments, corporate boardrooms have made a fetish of gender proportionality. Even before California mandated female board hires, I routinely voted against every female who shows up on a proxy ballot, since I assume that she is there because of her sex and not her business experience. A case in point, Drew Kilburn Faust, the outgoing president of Harvard, recently accepted a position on the board of Goldman Sachs. Now, who knew that left-wing history professors were experts in investment banking? University administrators and faculty may hate capitalism, but they love capitalist dollars. Even classical music is being poisoned by identity politics. New Yorker music critic Alex Ross triggered outrage against the Chicago and Philadelphia Symphony Orchestras this spring by tweeting that they had programmed no female composers in their upcoming seasons. Never mind that at that very moment, the Chicago Symphony was at Carnegie Hall performing Jennifer Higdon's Concerto for Low Brass, a work commissioned by the Chicago and Philadelphia orchestras at no doubt greatly inflated cost. It is absurd to expect gender parity in the concert hall. The reality is this: the greatest composers of all time, whether Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Chopin, or Brahms, were male. Get over it. And simply be grateful for the beauty that they gave us unworthy mortals. But classical music boards are also under enormous pressure to hire by gender and race for conducting positions and everything else. A classical music agent told me wistfully, quote, "If only I had a trans conductor, I'd be rich." Now, it is an unalloyed pleasure that Hollywood is being forced to sacrifice its best box office judgment to meet the demands of the race and gender bean counters. But it is in the sciences where the diversity imperative becomes actually dangerous. Every academic science department, whether physics, mathematics, or chemistry, is in the victimologist's crosshairs. The federal government is demanding that scientific departments hire based on gender and race rather than scientific merit. Science education is being slowed down and watered down in the hope of graduating more females and underrepresented minorities. An oncologist at an Ivy League medical school was berated by his dean for an exam in pharmacology that was, quote, too fact-based. Well, I don't know about you, but if I have cancer, I want my doctor to know the facts about drug interactions. The National Science Foundation is spending billions of your taxpayer dollars on programs to boost diversity in science, arguing that only a diverse laboratory can achieve scientific breakthroughs. Well, that's funny because somehow the 200 National Science Foundation grantees who won Nobel Prizes managed to discover dark matter and the genetics of viruses, among other breakthroughs, without conforming to today's diversity metrics. And of course, this mania for gender and race parity in science continues into the private sector. After James Damore was fired, a human resources manager sued YouTube and Google for firing him because he had refused to go along with the mandate to interview only females and underrepresented minorities for incoming engineering jobs. Potentially groundbreaking scientists are being passed over today because they are of the wrong race and gender. Guess who does not care about diversity? China. The best thing that Trump could do to level the playing field would be to airlift a few cargo planes of gender theorists from American universities and dump them on Beijing University and China's research labs. Until that happens, China will inexorably pull out ahead of us, since in science, it cares only about one thing: scientific achievement. Academic identity politics is tearing our society apart. It is teaching young people to hate the greatest thinkers and creators of the past, and to hate their fellow Americans. The diversity delusion, therefore, has to be nipped in the bud. The next time self-engrossed students occupy a campus building demanding reparations, here is what their college president should say: "Are you kidding me? You're the most privileged individuals in human history. You have at your fingertips the thing that Faust sold his soul for: knowledge. You're surrounded by libraries that would have driven the Renaissance humanists wild with envy and desire. You can read any book that has ever been written. You have access to scientific laboratories that are the most advanced in the world. You can pursue languages, literature, and history everything is available. Far from discriminating against minorities and females in hiring, every faculty search here is one desperate effort at finding remotely qualified underrepresented minority and female candidates who have not already been scooped up by better endowed schools. Far from discriminating against underrepresented minorities in admissions, we employ double standards in order to engineer so-called diversity.
Tonight, I am proud to be introducing a woman who worked directly with President Ronald Reagan during his years in office. Bae Buchanan is a native from Washington, D.C., and has a master's degree in mathematics from McGill University, and has furthered her studies at universities such as the University of New South Wales in Australia and Samford University. Bae Buchanan began her career as the national treasurer of Ronald Reagan's presidential campaign in 1980 and again in 1984. She made history by becoming the youngest person to hold that position at the age of 32. From September of 1996 through August of 1999, she co-anchored Equal Time, a political talk show. In addition, she worked as a political analyst for Good Morning America throughout the general election in 1992. In 1996, George Magazine recognized her as one of the top 20 political women in the nation. The Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute named Bae Buchanan the 2007 Woman of the Year, and again in 2011, she was named as one of the 10 most influential conservative women in America. In 2012, Bae Buchanan served as senior advisor to the Mitt Romney presidential campaign. In this role, she became a top surrogate for the candidate on both national television and radio. In her career, she has published 2 books, The Extreme Makeover of Hillary Clinton, and Bae and Her Boys, The Unexpected Lessons I Learned as a Single Mom. Currently, Bae Buchanan resides in Virginia and is the president of the American Cause, which is an educational foundation dedicated to advancing traditional conservative issues. She regularly speaks on college campuses and at student conventions about leadership and conservative principles. She's an inspiring woman in American politics, and I am grateful to have the opportunity of welcoming her to the stage. Let's all welcome Bae Buchanan.
Thanks very, very much. It's terrific to be here. I understand you all have just been up to the ranch today. My first opportunity to be at that ranch was with an individual called Governor Reagan at the time. He had not succeeded. We were in the middle of a campaign, and it was prior to his success in 1980. He was there with Nancy, entertaining some of the campaign workers and supporters. And what I have to tell you, as you probably learned, he loved that place. He truly loved it. It was his favorite place to be. And so as a result, I think you get a real spirit about who that man was, you get a sense of what was important to him. And that's what I want to share a little bit about today, as well as talking to you about how important the cause that he led was and your involvement in it, if you so choose. But the key is that it's step 1. This is a first step that you've taken. And I'm going to challenge you to take many, many more, because the purpose of learning about ideas and principles and a direction a nation should take, to get a sense of who you are, what you believe, what's important to you. It's about you becoming a leader, becoming the person you're meant to be, and to be proud of that being, to be somebody that wants to speak about that which is important to you. And the only way you can do that is to work on it. You can't just wake up one day and say, that's it, I'm going to be a conservative leader, a conservative activist, or a leader in any sphere, without knowing first what it is that you believe, what you believe, not folks, not your parents, not your teachers, not me, not anyone else. What is it that you believe? And then to have an understanding of why this is different, why somebody doesn't agree, why is this important to me, why does this make a difference? And once you get that passion, once you get that sense that this is a critical issue, this is something I would be willing to fight for, to sacrifice for, because I think it is so important to me, to my family, to my community, to my nation. Then you're down the road of being a leader, and then it takes one more step. It takes courage. It takes an enormous amount of courage for you to be a real leader, a true leader, someone who is not hesitant when you're facing opposition. So let's take each of those points. Why is it important to be a leader? Why does this country, this cause, of which I've represented and fought for how many years, decades now, why is it important? Because to be a leader means you influence, you uplift, you guide, you direct, you are able to influence others. You can change people. You can change the direction of a community. You can influence your family for the better if you are a leader. And you hear about leaders around the country in elected office, and they're not leaders. It's just terminology. It's just something that the press uses to say, well, you were elected, so you're a leader. That's not the case. To be a true leader means that you're willing to stand up for those things you believe in the midst of opposition, because this is what you want to do. You want to move people in this direction. Go over here. Push them along. It doesn't matter that it's 10 to 1. You stay with what you believe. You don't say, well, I'm going to go along, get along, have good friends. Doesn't matter that much. Too many people in Congress and elected offices across this country find it more important for them to stay in office rather than do what's right. And as a result, this country and the families in it, the workers here in this nation have suffered enormously. They get back to Washington or their state capital. They had a cause. They believed they would fight for it. They wanted to. They represented this to their constituents, and they got elected. But when they got into office, they realized this is a good job. Why would I want to offend the leader of my party by not voting the way he wants me to vote? He's going to help me keep this job. And that's when we get lost as a nation, when our leaders put as their priority staying in the job, not offending anyone. That's when we go wrong. And so what does a leader do in those circumstances? There's no reason to offend anyone deliberately, but if it means that you're going to sell out your vote, you say no. This is my vote. This is my responsibility. I'm fighting for those things I told my voters I would fight for. And so I don't care if you're the President of the United States saying, no, I need your vote. You say, Mr. President, I love you, I've supported you, but on this one, you're wrong. We can't take the country that direction. You know that. And I will fight against you on this one. Then you are the leader. They don't own you. But you don't have to run for office to be a leader. In fact, it has very little to do with that. You need to be someone who you need to be someone who is confident, who is bold, who knows what's important to you, and then take it from there. So let's say why. Why is being a leader so important? You know what it is to influence others. Why is it so important? It's important to the country. It's important to our cause. Take a look at what George Washington said. He understood perfectly that we are going to need leaders, true leaders, throughout our history, or we will lose this country. He said that the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty is entrusted in the hands of the American people. He didn't say the elected elite. He didn't say the rich and famous. He didn't say corporate leaders. He said in the hands of the American people. That is you. He didn't say when you become, you've graduated, you have a couple degrees, you got a good job, you're married, you got kids, you got a nice car, a condo. No. He said the American people, which means that each and every one of you have an obligation, due to the simple fact that you're born in this great country and have the blessings of being a citizen, of having these freedoms that we enjoy. It comes with responsibility. You need to keep it, and you only do that by fighting for it. You know what? I learned this from Ronald Reagan. You hear now a lot about Ronald Reagan. You learn about he's a great president, a great communicator, amazing man. You're right. He's all those things. But when he was running for president, and prior to that, he was ridiculed, called names, an extremist, a B actor with orange hair. That was actually correct. The dye didn't work too well. I remember when I was not much older than you all, and I became involved in a little bit of politics, just a little bit, on a summer job. I took an internship with Richard Nixon. I left, took a leave of absence from graduate school. And I became totally excited about the political world. I had this job for 6 months, and I thought, this is the most exciting thing. You go into the office, and people are talking about ideas. They're talking about movements. They're talking about how do we get into office? What did the governor of Tennessee just say? Can you believe he said that? And I'm thinking, this is an amazing place. All young people, all talking about what's in the newspapers and what's happening in this country. And I went to talk to my brother. I said, I'm going to finish getting my degree in math, but how do I stay in this business? Something he had done. He had entered into politics in his 20s and had been there ever since. So I said, how do I follow this path? And you know what he told me? He said, you find a candidate you believe in. Do not worry about whether they're going to win or lose. Don't go for the candidate you think's going to win. Find somebody you believe in. And Ronald Reagan was that person. And I felt so good because I was uncertain. And people were laughing and joking about the positions we take. And there he was, bigger than life, so proud to be the leader of the conservative movement in this country for years. He was the guy. And he had this smile on his face, and they were just trashing him constantly. And he never hesitated. He never backed down. He was so clear as to what was right, what he believed, and he stood tall and proud and defended those positions time and again. And I said, if he can be this way, I know this is the right way. I'm certain this cause is going to be my cause because I believe like he does, and he is so absolute about how he explains it without ever being ashamed. He is the guy that I can stand behind, that can encourage and inspire me. And so he did, and at that stage I said, this cause is my cause. I need to learn more about it. I want to be part of this. It was bigger than me. That's what you need, is to find something more important than yourself, a cause for your life. And I'm going to tell you how you do it. So once you have this idea that you do want to be a leader, you know now what it is, you know why it's important. I'm going to give you a couple of ingredients, some critical aspects of true leadership. One, I touched upon, ideas. What do you believe? What is important to you? What defines you? What's in your heart? So how do you do that? You can't know, you're young. You can't know all the issues. I've debated most every issue out there, if not every one of them, for years. And some are more important to me than others. Some I'm like, oh, okay, but I don't really want to. And others are like, just give me a chance to be a spokesperson for that particular issue. Just give me the opportunity. Anytime, I will accept it. So you find something that means something to you. Pick an issue. Start out with pro-life. If you're pro-choice, and that's important to you, pick pro-choice. How about guns? That's a good one. You'll find a lot of interest on that on college campuses or on even your campuses at high school. How about the war? What should the American involvement be? Is this something that interests you? How about immigration? There's many, many issues. What is it that you are interested in now? Which one sparks your interest as you see something come up on the web or somewhere else on that internet, wherever it is? What do you want to mention to your friends? And decide, this is the one I want. Pick something that is critical, that's out there today, that people are discussing, that is controversial, and learn about it. Okay? You say you're for guns. Okay, I'm for guns now. All right, so why do they want to limit these guns? Why do they want to register these guns? Let's read what the other side says. Whenever CNN used to call me and say, today, can you come in and talk about guns? I would try to figure out, why is it in today's news? Learn about the episode that's happened that would have focused everybody's attention on this issue. And then I go to no handguns ever for anyone, including the police, all right? I want to know what the opposition is saying. so that I'm not surprised when they hit me. Because there's been many times on television when I'm debating the issue where the other side raises an excellent point. And I have to say to myself, whoa, that's a good argument. And when I was the host of the show, I'd move it to another issue because I knew I was losing this one. They had raised a very good point. And then I'd go home and I'd call my brother and I'd say, you know what they say? This is a very valid point. He said, it's their best point, Bay. It's their best argument, but I think this one is better. And so then when next time I got hit with that one, I would say, okay, I'm ready for it, okay? This is tough, okay? But you have to learn what it is you believe. Keep an open mind. You listen to other people. You learn what they have to say. Secondly, you have to take it to the next step. Is this so important to you that you will fight for it, that you will put yourself on the line for it? Is this issue one that touches your heart? I use pro-life constantly. Why? Because it is the one I am most passionate about. I am passionate about fair trade, and I finally have a president that shares my views. I've been in the Republican Party a long time. They're free traders. I am a fair trader. All right? I'm passionate about that because the impact it makes on working men and women. I'm passionate about immigration. I've been part of that movement for years. I've been out there speaking about it. And I'm passionate about life. There's many issues, and I did it one at a time. I learned about it. I discussed it. I tried to figure out why are people so opposed to this position. Maybe I could change my position. I was once a free trader. I changed to become a fair trader. All right? These are things that you're going to do. Keep an open mind, but understand what the other side is saying. And then the next thing that's critical is that you have courage. Once you figure out what it matters, what issues matter to you, one, start with one, maybe two, that's it, and it becomes part of you. You learn so much about it. As I study and learn more and more about the pro-life movement, I understand that the woman is the second victim. It became more and more clear to me that it's never good, not for the baby, surely, and certainly not for the mother. And so I became that much more, energized by this movement, certain about my position. You learn things that make it more and more important to you. But you have to then have courage. The expression is, do you have the courage of your convictions? Those terms are purposely put together because convictions is one thing. You can be absolutely certain that you're pro-gun, that you're a Second Amendment defender to the hilt. But when you hear some people talking about it after a terrible shooting, maybe you don't want to say anything. You don't want to tell anybody. You just don't need the hassle, all right? Well, then you don't have the courage of your convictions. You just have the convictions. But if you don't speak, if you don't talk, how can you influence others? How can you make a difference? How can you motivate people to change their lives, to consider your position? You can't. You have to have the courage. So how do you go about this? How do you figure that all out? You know, as Ronald Reagan would travel the country, he would always speak from his heart, because that's where his beliefs were. He had so studied the issues that it was in his heart. He didn't have to worry about the facts and the figures to convince you that he was right. So many times on TV, if you watch, you'll see that there's policy wonks out there with all the facts and the percentages and the numbers to convince you this is the way to go. And so you, as you study issues, will start to think, I need to know all this little minutia. I need to know the facts or else I'm going to fail. Well, it's always important to have something down, to have a couple good issues. I know when I'm on TV, I'll always drop 1 or 2 points, 1 or 2 statistics or something early on just to get them out of the way so it gives me authority. People say, well, she's certainly an authority on this topic. And then I say, forget it. Now I've done that, okay? Because people can't take in all these facts and figures. So if you've decided to become a leader on a certain issue, to become a spokesperson for a certain cause, then you need to study it well enough so that you have a good overall position. You know some facts, you know what they're going to say, but it's in your heart. When Reagan ran in 1980, a campaign headquarters for the primary was out here in LAX, right across from LAX. And the media they didn't have the computers in those days. And so when he'd go out, Nancy made it clear, you go out Monday, you come back Thursday, I get him Thursday night to Monday morning. She was wise, but it doesn't matter if she was or not. She made the decisions and we followed. All right, she was in charge. She gave him 4 days for the primary to campaign. She didn't want him looking old, and she was completely correct. He was one of the older candidates to run for president. We don't need him looking old. So, which is something he never had to worry about with Ronald Reagan. He looked like $1 million always, enormous amount of energy. So he goes out traveling on Monday. He goes maybe Iowa, breakfast, lunch, maybe a dinner, maybe an afternoon meeting with businessmen, flies over to Florida, does the same, maybe back to Iowa, a different part of Iowa, maybe New Hampshire, whatever the trip was. It's 4 days. And the media traveled with him. They had a plane for the media, or they were in back of his plane. And they came back, and they'd walk by my office to file their stories. We had a media room, and they have to use the phones to file their stories. And I heard him all laughing, coming in constantly, every week. And so I asked one of them, what are you talking about? You're always, and they said, he has one speech, Bay. He goes out and gives a speech for breakfast, and at lunch it's the same speech, and when he meets with a bunch of businessmen, he gives part of that speech, and at night he gives the same speech, and the next day we start all over again. They were completely frustrated. He didn't have something different to say every day. But you know what they missed? Is the reaction of the people. He wasn't talking to them. He was talking to the people who were there to see him, or the people watching him on TV or listening on radio. And he would get up there, and they were laughing with him. They were crying with him. They were so moved because he spoke from his heart. He spoke, and he touched them. He touched their heart. And they would leave the place and say, my gosh, he knows us. He understands us. He loves us. He believes in us. And they would tell their family, we called it the prairie fire, because it would be a little fire here, a little fire, it was just burning. From 1976, when he first ran, up into 80 through the campaign. The fire just spread because he cared about the people. He was talking directly to you, and they felt it. And he won the audience. 1,000 people at breakfast, they'd all go home and tell their families, their people at the office, what an amazing man this was. And for months, no one believed we could win. Why? Because he only had one speech in him. He wasn't all that bright. You know, he's a real extremist. And they ridiculed him and ridiculed. But the press thinks with their minds. They don't have any experience with being touched. And the American people do. How did Ronald Reagan inspire our country? He became president of the United States under these circumstances, all right, where people were ridiculing him and laughing about him. And he won overwhelmingly. And the country was down and out in the Carter years. They called it the malaise. The Americans felt that the best years were behind them. Inflation and unemployment were just at record numbers. I remember I bought a house back in those days from people who had to sell because they had 20% interest rate. That's what we were looking at. Businesses were crumbling. Who could afford this? And he becomes president of the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, his policies were outstanding. But that's not what turned the country around. It was turned around while he was passing legislation, trying to working with the media, working with Congress, fighting to get those things he promised, like a tax cut, through. But in the meantime, the country was being turned around. Why? Because he went before the American people, and he said, I'm here. Thanks to you, I'm here. But I can't do the hard work. I'm going to pass policies like I promised that are going to help you. I have your backs, but I can't create. I can't build. I can't hire. I can't expand. That's what you do, and I believe in you. I have seen what the American people are capable of. I know you can do it again, and I'm asking you, believe in America, and I will believe in you, and let us turn this country around together. And they did. Small businesses just started to pop up everywhere. People started to expand their businesses. And within months, you could feel the optimism in the nation. Where did that come from? He inspired them because he loved the people, he believed in the American people, and that was his cause. It was America he believed in. He wasn't there for himself. He was there because he knew this country needed to get on a different track. It needed to be changed. It needed to be uplifted. It needed to be encouraged. It needed to believe in itself again. And that's what he did because he was a true leader. And he spoke from his heart and let them know, I'm with you. We're in it together. It was a cause, and his cause was this great country of ours. And this great country has to become your cause. We need leaders all the time, every generation. And we need young people to step up to the bat and to start putting themselves out so that they're prepared. So each and every one of you are prepared. And I'm going to tell you how. Pick an issue. I use choice. I use pro-life as an example. All right? It doesn't have to be pro-life. If that's not your issue, not a problem. Pick an issue. So, if you're pro-life, and you tell me you're pro-life, the first thing I say to you is, have you told your pro-choice friends that? Go and talk to pro-choicers. What good is it to talk to pro-lifers? Don't get me wrong, be friends, try to do things with them, ask them, talk to them about where they're coming from, but also go talk to pro-choicers. Sit down with a roommate. In high school, if you have friends on a team that you play, wherever it is, and mention any opportunity you get. You go and you say, I'm going to talk to somebody today. And you say, how is it? How is it you could possibly be pro-choice? When every single time a life is taken, a baby's life is taken, how can you support such a policy? Mark my words. They will say, are you telling me you support a 14-year-old raped by her dad to have a baby? You're going to force her to have the baby. And you're going to say, well, maybe I'm not so sure anymore. All right, but that's their best argument. You have to have somebody throw that in your face. Even though in your heart you might say, oh, yeah, I don't think we should have abortions. But what about that circumstance? You need to start thinking about that. And you might say to yourself, you know, as you leave, okay, well, I don't think I want to do this again. That wasn't any fun. All right? Because you're awkward, you're hesitant, you're not certain what to say. That means you're not ready. So you go talk to pro-lifers now. If you talk to me, I'm going to say, listen, it's a very tough call. It's a very tough question. But since I've never been given authority on which babies live and which babies don't, then I will always support life for every one of them. That's my position. I can't pick and choose who live and die. All right? Now, others say, no. Rape, incest, you have to have an exception for that. It's a legitimate position. I have many friends who take that position. All right? You got to come up to what you believe. What's in your heart? Talk to people. Read more about women who've had abortions. There's a great movement out there, Silent No More. Women who've been quiet about their abortions because they were so ashamed of them. They never mentioned. They were so hurt. They carry enormous scars. And when you start to talk to them or read their positions or their statements, you start realizing, my gosh, this is a terrible thing to have put on a woman. And then you become a little more assured that this is wrong. It's just a horrible, horrible decision. There's got to be a better way. And then you go back and say, okay, I'm ready. I know where I stand on this one. I know exactly what we need is to support somebody. Enormous support that somebody's been through a horrible crime of a rape or incest. But I can't, the best thing for them is to have the baby. Or that's the exception. Whatever it is. Now you go back again. You're ready for their best argument. And now you can be a little more assured, and you can push them a little bit. How about viability? You guys for viability? Baby can be viable outside the womb. That happens early enough. Okay, do you support that or not? Get the discussion going. Respect them that they're different, but push them to realize. And then you make your statement, listen, it's a life. Every time it's a life. That's not cells, it's a baby. Call it a baby. Make them think. And you keep going back and back until you're ready. And then you figure out, wait, some opportunity you have with a larger group, a classroom, math class, I don't care, history class, where something comes up. Kavanaugh is being debated to be a Supreme Court justice. What's his position in life? Have somebody say, oh, no, he's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Ha ha, here's my chance. And you say, you know, this Roe v. Wade stuff, let me explain why people are so concerned about it. It's a baby that we're talking about. That's why people get so interested in this issue, so concerned, so passionate. We're talking about the life and death of a baby. And then you make it short because they're going to all turn on you. Okay? I've talked to people, women on campuses that have been chastised, whose roommates won't talk to them anymore. People say things to them in the hallways because they said it's wrong to have an abortion. That's all they said. So you got to be ready. This is the courage. And you make that statement. You make it clear. It's every time it's a baby or every time it's two victims. Whatever statement it is that's in your heart. You make it very short. You make it clear. You make it passionate. You say it boldly. Why? Because you don't know who's in that classroom with you, who has never, ever heard anybody speak passionately, give a voice for the unborn, have said it's a baby. And all of a sudden they say, you know, they're all looking at you like you lost your mind to raise this issue in this group of pro-choicers, and obviously there's consequences for you. Why would that person have made that statement so clearly? And they have this thing in the back of their mind, you don't know 6 months from now, 2 years from now, where they may be looking at this decision of what they should do because of their present circumstances. And all that rings in the back of their mind is, it's a baby. You can save lives. You can influence others. You can make them realize how important issues are, that they should really focus and look at them and study them and consider them, and not just be reactionary or mouthpieces for teachers. This is being a leader, is to make a difference in the lives of others, to influence your own family, to be certain about what you believe as you teach and raise your children, not hesitant. I know women and men and women who of my generation said, you know, I smoke dope, so I don't really think it's right for me to tell my kids that they shouldn't. What? What kind of crazy nonsense is that? Have you learned nothing in all your years alive? What are you know, you tell your kids that's not right, okay? Get it? This is wrong. You make it clear to them. That's what a leader does. You're sure of it because you've studied this. You know what's good. You know what's right. And you're confident enough to make certain that you let your children know what's important to you in your communities, in your schools. I remember my son once in high school. I've got 3 boys I raised as a single mom. And he had a best friend, Freddie, still best friend of his. And in high school, he brings Freddie by. He spent all kinds of time at our house. And he came racing into the kitchen and said, Mom, you have to talk to Freddie. I said, why? He says, he's pro-choice. And I said, well, I don't know if I really want to put poor Freddie on the spot here. He was shocked that his close friend would ever consider that abortion was okay. He was shocked. And I never sat him down and told him, this is right. I just spoke about the unborn. I took him to the marches. We talked about it constantly, but it was just part of our discussion, as part of who I am. And all 3 of my boys are pro-life, adamantly pro-life. That's the way it is. They care about what's important to you. And so make certain they know that. That's what being a leader is. You know, we've been enormously blessed, every one of you, enormously blessed. We have this right, this First Amendment right, freedom of speech. Why would schools want to restrict your right to speak? Why would they want to tell you what you can say and how you can say it, and what words are verboten, and what thoughts are verboten from being spoken aloud? Why would that matter to them? Because your voice is power. There's enormous strength. You can make a difference. You can create a movement. You can help build a cause. I'm never afraid to speak exactly what I believe, but they don't want to hear it because they can't defend against it anymore. They are on a weak side of the argument, a much weak side. They have been proven wrong, and so they don't want to hear the other side. They don't want the young people to hear it. That is your job. You can reach them. You can let them know in a way that means something to you because you're speaking from your heart. And they will be influenced by that. They will be touched by that. And while they might not say it now, you could change their lives for the better. This is an enormous gift we have been given, to be who we're meant to be able to express ourselves, to talk about what's important, to be able to touch others with those thoughts and beliefs, that they might benefit from them. It's a gift of being a true leader for yourselves, your family, your community, and for your nation. And that is what I'll call upon every one of you. Make a commitment tonight that you're going to begin this process, that you might build yourself to be the person, to gain that courage, to put yourself on the line, to feel the discrimination that comes your way, to feel the intimidation, and realize once you do that many, many times, over and over, it won't bother you. You'll know, I'm bigger than that. This is more important than that. I am going to be the person I was meant to be, and I'm going to enjoy the rights of being an American every single day. And no one is going to intimidate me and make me hesitant of speaking loudly, boldly, clearly about those things that I believe. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Yes, thank you.